You have been trying to manifest money. Maybe you wrote it down, maybe you visualized the numbers, or maybe you repeated affirmations in the mirror until your voice went dry. And still, the bank account looks the same. The bills are still there, and that familiar anxiety is still sitting in your chest every morning when you check your phone. You are not broken, and you are not unlucky. You are simply making the same mistake that almost every person who discovers manifestation makes at the beginning. You are targeting money itself, and that is exactly why it keeps escaping you. Here is the reframe that changes everything. King Solomon was the wealthiest human being in all of recorded history, a man whose fortune makes every modern billionaire look modest by comparison. Gold arrived at his throne in quantities that historians still struggle to comprehend. And yet, when he was given the chance to ask for anything in the universe, Solomon did not ask for a single coin. He asked for one specific psychological state, and infinite wealth was forced upon him as a natural consequence. Neville Goddard taught the same principle thousands of years later, and almost nobody listened carefully enough. Today, you will. Stay with this video, because what you are about to understand will permanently restructure the way you think about money, wealth, and who you are in relation to both. Pay close attention here, because the first error is an innocent one, the error of a beginner, and there is no shame in having made it. But once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it, and that clarity will serve you for the rest of your life. Most people who discover the law of attraction, or who stumble onto the teachings of Neville Goddard, immediately begin doing one thing. They focus intensely on what they do not have. They visualize money because they feel poor, repeat wealth affirmations because they feel broke, and create vision boards of luxury because every single day feels like scarcity. The desire itself is born from a wound, and they try to heal that wound by staring directly at it. This is the amateur error, and it guarantees failure every time. Neville Goddard was precise about this. He taught that consciousness is the only reality, and that the outer world, the numbers in your account, the opportunities that appear, the people who help or hinder you, none of that is the cause of your experience. All of it is the effect. The entire three-dimensional world you can see and touch is simply your inner state made visible, a projection rather than a prison. Now, here is where it gets critical. When you focus on wanting money, what is the emotional state underneath that focus? It is want. It is lack. It is the deep, persistent feeling of not having. And Neville was relentless on this point, returning to it lecture after lecture, book after book. You do not attract what you desire. You attract what you are. Your state of being is the broadcast, and reality is simply the signal that returns to you at the same frequency. If you are broadcasting the consciousness of a person who does not have enough, the universe has no choice but to send you experiences that confirm that identity, because the law does not judge or prefer. It simply mirrors your assumed state with perfect mechanical precision, without sentiment, without exception. This means that every moment you spend visualizing money from a place of desperation is a moment you are reinforcing the very identity you are trying to escape. The wanting itself is the repellent, and the hunger itself keeps the table empty. There is a name for this condition in metaphysical literature, the vibration of lack, and it is invisible to those who carry it because it feels completely justified. Of course, the feeling of shortage seems like an honest response to reality when you genuinely have very little. But Neville Goddard would tell you, with complete conviction, that the feeling is not a response to reality. The feeling is the creator of reality. This is the diagnosis. This is the block. And the question now becomes, If wanting money repels it, what inner state actually attracts it? Solomon knew, and his answer, written in one of the oldest books on earth, is more psychologically sophisticated than almost anything taught in modern finance or personal development. Listen to this story carefully, because every detail carries weight. In the 3rd chapter of the 1st book of Kings, the young Solomon has just ascended to the throne of Israel, and the weight of an entire civilization rests on his inexperienced shoulders. One night, in a dream state that the Bible treats with complete seriousness, the divine mind appears to him with an extraordinary offer. Ask for anything you want, anything at all. Solomon does not ask for gold, does not ask for a long life, and does not ask for the destruction of his many enemies. He asks for one thing: an understanding heart, wisdom, the capacity to discern between good and evil, to govern wisely, to think clearly, to perceive deeply. He asks for a psychological state, and the response is immediate. Because Solomon asked for the right thing, the inner condition rather than the outer reward, everything else is added without effort. Riches beyond imagination, honor beyond precedent, a legacy that would echo across millennia. This is not mythology. This is a precise metaphysical instruction embedded inside an ancient text, and Neville Goddard spent decades teaching this exact principle under the name he gave it: living in the end. He taught that the greatest mistake a person can make is to focus on the means, the money, the opportunity, the pathway, rather than on the inner state that corresponds to already having arrived. In his work, The Power of Awareness, he wrote words that deserve to be read slowly. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Rest in the assumption that you are already what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, all things are possible. That is the Solomon request, translated into the precise language of modern psychology. Solomon did not ask for wealth. He asked for the state of being that a wise and sovereign king naturally inhabits, and wealth, which is simply the outer expression of that kind of sovereignty, followed without resistance. This is a point Neville returned to constantly, and it is also one that his mentor Abdullah, the Ethiopian rabbi who taught Neville in Harlem during the 1930s, emphasized with great force. Abdullah taught Neville that the Bible is not a historical record, but a psychological manual, that every story is an internal drama playing out in the consciousness of the reader, and that Solomon is not a king you read about from a distance. Solomon is a state you can occupy. Consider what that means for your own life right now. The wealth you are seeking is not withheld from you by circumstance or fate. It is withheld only by the state you are currently occupying, and Solomon shows you the correction with unmistakable clarity. Stop asking for the treasure. Ask for the consciousness of the one who deserves the treasure. Inhabit that state fully, and let the three-dimensional world do what it always does. Conform to the assumption. The outer world is not your enemy. It is your obedient mirror. Now the teaching deepens considerably, and the precision of what Neville Goddard built becomes impossible to ignore. Neville was not a motivational speaker offering comfort to discouraged people. He was a precise metaphysical scientist working within a framework drawn from Scripture, from Kabbalah, from William Blake, and from his own direct mystical experience. When he spoke about the law of assumption, he was not offering positive thinking advice or self-help encouragement. He was describing a mechanical law of consciousness as reliable and as impersonal as gravity. Assumptions, when held with persistence and felt as true in the imagination, harden into fact. Not sometimes, not under special conditions or favorable circumstances, but always, without exception, regardless of the current appearance of things. The imagination, in Neville's framework, is not a tool you use occasionally before sleep. It is the very substance of all that exists, the material from which the visible world is continuously constructed. William Blake, whom Neville quoted with deep reverence throughout his teaching career, wrote that imagination is not a state. It is human existence itself. And this was not poetic metaphor. It was a declaration of the deepest metaphysical fact either man had touched. The entire visible universe is crystallized imagination, and you are its author, whether you know it or not. Now, here is the identity shift, and this is where Solomon's choice becomes personally applicable. Neville taught that you are always being someone. Right now, in this moment, you are being a specific person with specific assumptions about money, about your worth, about what is available to you in this life. That person has a history, a set of conditioned beliefs, and a set of automatic emotional responses to the word wealth. And the outer world is faithfully producing experiences that match that person with mechanical accuracy. The shift from beggar to king is therefore not a change in bank balance. It is a change in assumed identity, a decision to stop being the person who is trying to become wealthy, and to become, in imagination, the person who already is. You do not pretend or strain to force the feeling. You simply change the state you are living from, and you begin to think from the new identity rather than about it from a distance. Neville made this distinction with surgical precision. To think about wealth is to observe it from across a room. To think from wealth is to inhabit it completely. The first is wishing, and the second is creation. Now enter the Kabbalah, where the teaching becomes extraordinarily precise. On screen, follow these 4 letters carefully as each one is introduced. The divine name in Hebrew scripture, the name so sacred it was never spoken aloud, consists of 4 letters: Yod, He, Vav, and He. In English tradition, it is rendered as Yahweh or Jehovah. But Neville Goddard read these 4 letters as a complete formula for the creative process of consciousness itself. A formula that maps perfectly onto everything Solomon demonstrated. Yod is the first letter, representing the spark of pure awareness, the seed of consciousness before it takes any form. In the creative process, Yod is the moment of desire, the first silent impulse of imagination where wealth begins, not in a bank and not in an opportunity, but in the awareness of the one who first conceives it. He is the second letter, representing the womb, the first expansion of that seed into mental form. This is where imagination takes what Yod ignited and gives it shape and texture, where you form the felt image of yourself as the wealthy, sovereign, wise being you have chosen to become. Vav is the third letter, representing the bridge between inner and outer, the point where the inner state begins pressing itself into 3-dimensional form. This is where your persistent assumption starts moving reality. Circumstances shift, doors open, resources appear, not because you forced them, but because the inner mold has been firmly set, and the outer world has no choice but to conform to it. The second, He, is the final letter, representing the completed manifestation, the outer expression of what was first conceived in silence. This second, He, is the paycheck, the opportunity, the unexpected arrival of resources, the business deal that seems to come from nowhere. It is always the last thing to appear because it is always the last thing in the sequence, the final echo of what was first whispered in awareness. Write this permanently into your understanding. The bank account is always the last He, and most people are staring at that last He, gripping it with anxiety and trying to change it directly. They are working at the wrong end of the formula entirely. Neville Goddard taught relentlessly that you must always work at the level of Yod, in pure awareness, in imagination, in the silent assumption of the state, and that everything following from that point is automatic. Bring this into your actual life right now, because the distance between ancient metaphysics and a Tuesday morning with a low bank balance is shorter than it appears. You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes have fully adjusted to the light, and the number in your account is lower than you need it to be. There is a bill due, there is a payment you have been waiting on that has not arrived, and the familiar tightness appears in your chest before you have even spoken a single word. Every conditioned reflex you have accumulated over years of financial stress tells you to think about the problem immediately, to calculate, to worry, to strategize from a place of fear, to do something. Neville Goddard and every supporting witness in this teaching are unanimous on what you must do instead. You must stop, take a breath, and remember which end of the formula you are working from. Not because the bill is not real or the need is not genuine, but because you now understand what Solomon understood 3,000 years ago. The outer condition is the last letter of the formula. It has no power to create itself. It only reflects what has already been assumed inside. Joseph Murphy, one of the most important voices in the New Thought tradition and a natural companion to Neville's work, described this dynamic with beautiful clarity in his foundational text, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. Murphy taught that riches are a state of consciousness before they are ever a state of affairs, and he was specific about the mechanism. The subconscious mind does not reason, does not argue, and does not distinguish between what is imagined and what is physically real. It simply accepts what is impressed upon it with feeling and moves to produce a matching outer experience with the full force of everything it controls, which is considerably more than most people realize. Murphy called this principle secret riches, meaning the wealth that already exists in the deep interior of your subconscious assumption, hidden not by any external force, but simply by the fact that most people have never learned to look inward as the true location of all causation. The fortune is already there, waiting not to be created, but to be expressed, because expression always follows assumption with the same inevitability that a shadow follows the body that casts it. Murphy's practical instruction was precise and consistent with everything Neville taught. Before you sleep each night, enter a genuinely relaxed state and feel the reality of your desire already fulfilled. Not think it, not wish it with mental effort, but feel it with the full emotional texture of a person who has already received it. The subconscious mind will accept that feeling as its instruction and begin moving every pathway within its vast reach toward making it true in the physical world. The method is simple. The discipline required to do it consistently, rather than defaulting back to worry, is where most people fall short. There is a second move that completes the practice, and Neville called it good abandonment, perhaps the most counterintuitive instruction in the entire body of his teaching. Once you have assumed the state, once you have genuinely felt the reality of being wealthy, sovereign, and complete, you must release the grip of monitoring it. Not abandon the desire itself, but release the compulsive struggle around it, the anxious checking, the hourly calculation of how close the manifestation might be. Neville taught that this monitoring impulse is itself a confession that you do not truly believe the assumption has taken hold. The person who actually possesses something does not constantly verify that they possess it. They live from the having, naturally and without effort. The anxiety of checking is the behavior of someone still operating from the state of not having, and the subconscious reads behavior as instruction. Good abandonment means you have planted the seed and you trust the ground completely. A farmer who has planted with confidence does not dig up the seed every morning to measure its progress. He lives his daily life, while the invisible process moves toward completion beneath the surface. This is the practical instruction for that Tuesday morning with the low balance. Acknowledge the current appearance without being enslaved by it. Return deliberately to the inner state. Feel the completeness of a person who has more than enough. And then move through your day with the quiet authority of someone who understands which end of the formula they are working from. The three-dimensional world will catch up, because the law is not emotional, not sentimental, and not inconsistent. It simply and always expresses whatever state you persistently inhabit. Here is the metaphysical resolution, and it is simpler than everything that led up to it. Everything presented in this teaching converges on one radical conclusion. You are not a person trying to become wealthy, struggling against a universe that withholds from you. You are infinite awareness, temporarily inhabiting a limited state of identity. And wealth is not something outside of you waiting to be attracted, but a state of consciousness waiting to be assumed. The moment you fully occupy the inner identity of a person who possesses, governs, creates, and gives abundantly, the outer world will reorganize itself around that assumption as naturally and inevitably as water finds its level, because that is the only thing the outer world has ever known how to do. Solomon asked for wisdom rather than gold because he understood, at the deepest level of his being, that the inner state is the only variable that matters, and that everything else, every coin, every alliance, every expression of abundance, is consequence rather than cause. Neville Goddard spent his entire life translating that ancient understanding into language a modern mind could grasp. Teaching in the lecture halls of New York, speaking on radio programs, writing in plain and urgent language about the most profound metaphysical realities he knew. And his core message never changed across the decades. The world you experience is the world you have assumed, and to change the world, you change the assumption. The Kabbalah confirms this with the formula of Yod He Vav He, which is not a prayer directed at a distant deity, but a description of how you, as infinite intelligence made personal and specific, create every moment of your experience. You are both the Yod and the final He simultaneously, the one who plants the seed in imagination and the one who walks through the door when it opens in physical reality. William Blake, whom Neville called the greatest psychologist who ever lived, saw the visible world as nothing more than a veil, and behind that veil, the burning and ceaseless reality of imagination creating without pause, without rest, and without any power capable of stopping it. The ancient Kabbalists understood this with perfect clarity. They taught that Ein Sof, the infinite light that underlies all existence, does not withhold itself from any form it inhabits and cannot be made scarce. You are not separated from the source of all abundance by distance or by unworthiness. You are separated only by assumption, only by the story of limitation you have agreed to carry. The mystics of every tradition who touched this truth arrived at the same conclusion from different directions. The kingdom is not a destination to be reached after sufficient effort. It is a state available to consciousness the moment it chooses to occupy it fully and without apology. Assume the crown. Stop petitioning a universe that you believe is withholding from you, and start occupying the identity of the one who already reigns. This is what the Solomon Wealth Code has always been. Not a secret passed between kings in hidden chambers, not a code locked inside ancient temples, but the simple and staggering truth that the wealth you seek is the natural overflow of the state you persistently inhabit. Inhabit it now, not tomorrow, not after the outer conditions improve, but now, from within the current appearance of things, with the calm authority of a consciousness that knows how the formula works. If this teaching has shifted something in you today, if even one sentence struck you as a truth you have always carried but never heard said aloud, then you are exactly where you are supposed to be. This channel exists for precisely that moment of recognition. Subscribe to the Goddard Code and join a growing community of people who are finished hoping and have begun assuming, who are done working at the last He and have returned to the Yod, where all creation begins. Every week brings new teachings drawn from the full depth of Neville Goddard's work, woven together with the voices that confirm and extend his legacy into every area of modern life. The truth is not new, but perhaps today is the first day you were genuinely ready to hear it. Neville Goddard closed his lectures with a simplicity that cut through every complexity that came before it. He would say simply, "Try it." Not believe it, not prove it to anyone, not debate its merits. Try it. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, persist in that assumption with patience and without the need to verify it hourly, and watch with calm expectation as the world, faithful, mechanical, and utterly certain, bows to the crown you have chosen to wear. Try it.